Hey guys, in this video we'll be continuing with the C# video tutorials. So in this video we'll be doing the notes on, so we'll be starting arrays and lists. So we'll just talk about it. So to start, value types and reference types. So let's just have some notes down here. I'm in Writer. So value types and reference types. So probably just read it. If there's some code examples, which there won't be that many, there'll be some. I'll do them. If there's some really important notes, I'll write those down too. So the data types in C# and the .NET framework fall into two categories: value types and reference types. Variable that is used to hold a value such as 23 or 15.87 or the string hello and such is a value type of a variable. So they actually hold data. A variable that is used to reference an object is commonly called a reference variable, so you may have seen me use those a few times. So an example, let's just do some like a small example here. So for example, the value 10, that's a value type and it's an int. The string, like string, or let's say a string like fruit, that's a value type that holds data. A variable that is used to reference an object such as button, that's an object reference variable. So I could take button and point it to, so button points to new button, that'll create an object then. So the reference variable here was used to create an object. And for example, a value type is like int val points to 10. Or a string. String str points to fruit. Whatever. So that's it. The variable that is used to reference an object is commonly called a reference variable. So in Java they call them object reference variables. It's pretty much the same thing, a reference variable. I believe it's exactly the same thing. So reference variables can be used only to reference objects. They do not hold data, so you can't store an int. So string str is actually, I believe, an object reference variable too. So that can be confusing because strings are objects. So this is a little bit confusing as it is. Don't worry about it though. This is just going to be on a test. It's not going to be something you'll learn. You'll need to know the difference between. Like, you just use strings as a string. You don't need to think of them as objects or value types or reference types. When you're coding, it's just going to be a string to you. So you don't need to know the difference of that much. We might touch on that later on. So how a value type works: when you declare a value type variable, the compiler allocates a chunk of memory that is big enough for the variable. The memory that is allocated for a value type variable is the actual location that will hold the value assigned to the variable. When you're working with a value type, you're using a variable that holds a piece of data. Value type of variable actually holds the data. So that's just how it works. How a reference type works: when you work with a reference type, you use two things: an object that is created in memory and a variable that references the object. So these are all things that you may get tested on, probably. I mean, you just have to kind of memorize it, but if you're taking this in a university class, you can just study the notes. So a variable that references, Sorry, so let me just start that one more time. So when you work with a reference variable, you use two things: an object that is created in memory, and a variable that references the object. The object that is created in memory holds data. You need a way to refer to it. That's where the reference comes in. So a variable is then created to hold a value called reference. That's why it's called an object reference variable, because it's a variable and a reference is an object. So a reference variable does not hold an actual piece of data, it simply refers to the data. A reference type links the variable that holds actual data to the object. A good way to practice this stuff is to do the chapter review in like the textbook. If whatever textbook you learn from, just do the chapter review. There should be a chapter review at the end. The book answers to the practice questions are good too. At least do the chapter review. If you have time, do the book questions. Do everything if you can. Sometimes I get by with just doing the chapter review, so try that. That helps you with all the theories that you're going to get tested on in coding, like in university. Usually the coding problems themselves are easy. It's like the theory that you don't practice all the time that they try to get you on. So a reference type links a variable that holds actual data to the object. If a kite is the object, then the spool of string that holds the kite is the reference. That's some kind of example. So creating a reference type, two steps are typically required. Declare a reference variable and create an object and associate it with the reference variable. So an example is the random class. So let's do an example down here. So we could say, for example, random rand. It's exactly like Java, C#. So you could have random rand and then say rand points to new random. So you can do that, or you can do it in one line like this. So random. So you could say random rand points to new random, like just like that. Either way works. Depends. Sometimes you need to put some like above the constructor. You want to make it a field, and then in the constructor you'll create the object. Or sometimes you may just want to do it all in one. It just depends. You may not be able to do that all the time in the constructor. Just double check that if you can. If not, you just split it up in two. You've seen me, like, you can put random rand up here. You go to see if we can do that. Well, this for sure you can do. So private random rand. Then here in the constructor, where the constructor is where you set up the object. C# didn't talk about constructors too much. We may talk about it later on a little bit more. Okay, so then we could say rand points to new random. Let's just say we have random points to new random. Not sure if you can do this. Okay, so you can just create I think maybe you can do that too. That seems to work. Sometimes it may not always work, so just double check. The best thing to do is create an object reference field, then point it to the new object. That's what I do. That way you can create, I don't know if you can tag on private to this. Yeah, so you can privatize the field then, I think. 23 and 18. 23. Let's say 19. 19. Rand points a new random. Can you not do that? No, so you can do that. That's the problem with it. So you can't privatize your field that way when you want to create. If you want to instantiate an object all in one line in the constructor, you can't have an access modifier on it, like private. So that's the drawback with that. That's why I usually split it up in two. So I can add a access modifier on like that, like private or public or protected. So yeah, that's just an example. So where were we before? Okay, so back to the random example. So the random rand part declares a variable named rand. The new random part creates an object and returns a reference to the object. So that's also called instantiating an object. Instantiating means creating, basically, so it's the same thing. The equals operator assigns the reference that was returned from the new operator to the random variable. So that's pretty much all for value types and reference types. And now we're moving on to arrays. So array basics. We may have to split this up into like 2 parts. Maybe even 3. We're only like a 6th way down of the notes. Or a 5th. Okay, so array basics. An array allows you to store a group. So let's just delete this stuff here. So arrays. Arrays are very powerful. They use them everywhere in programming. So an array is a data structure. So an array allows you to store a group of items of the same data type together in memory. Arrays can have one variable and store a lot of data, whereas a normal variable can just hold usually just one piece of data. So an array allows you to store a group of items of the same data type together in memory. So in Python, they have basically a list is an array in Python. It's kind of confusing, but a list in Python, which is basically an array, can store any type. In C#, I believe you can only have one type per array. So processing a large number of items in an array is usually easier than processing a large number of items stored in separated variables. Excuse me. Sorry, let me just change something here. Okay, so where we have what do we have? Sorry. Okay, so we have, so basically we can have an example, for example, int val1. So the point of this is just to show that, or just int val points to 10. So you could, basically val only stores one piece of data. If you want to store another piece of data, you'd have to go val, or another int, then you'd have to go val 2 points to like 11. You can't go 10, 11, 12. That's basically getting into an array, which you can't do that because it's like, well, is it 10, 11, or 12? I can only hold 10, 11, or 12, or 10, 11, 12 as one number, right? So you can only pick one piece of data. So that's where arrays come in. You can store like an array of data. So each variable is a separated item so in this example here, each variable is a separated item that must be declared and individually processed. Variables are not ideal for storing and processing lists and data. So it just means basically storing multiple pieces of data and lists. Variables aren't ideal for that. So arrays are reference type objects. So to create an array, you need to declare a reference type object and then create the object and associate it with the reference variable. So in C#, the generic format to declare a reference variable for an array is, so we'll just do the general notation. What is all this crap that's coming up on the screen? License expires in 14 days. I just renewed that. I don't know why it's telling me that. Hopefully the video doesn't stop. I think it might. Hopefully not. Okay. Tab popped up. I already renewed it. I don't know why it's telling me that. I renewed it through my email. maybe it's another account. I don't think it's, I only have one student account, so anyways, we'll just continue here. I'll deal with that after. Okay, so what we have here, so the general notation to declare an array basically is data type array, then array name. So for example, we could have int array vals array. That's how you create an array. Sometimes I believe in Java you could say like int or vals array as well. So I think I usually go with this way, though. I think you can just do it with like this. So I stick with the way that kind of works across all the languages, whichever way that may be. So the generic format to create the array object and associate it with the variable is. So then we go. Excuse me. So that's just an array. That's an array object reference variable. So that's, I'm going to take that out because it might look confusing. But basically, you have to instantiate an array. It's kind of tricky. So then you have to go array name. No, not array name. Okay, so they're getting off. They're starting to put an example within an example. Okay, so data type array name. Then we go array name points to, you have to use a new keyword. Then we go data type. Then you have to include the array size. This is one way to do it. There's another way to do it. I forget what they call it. But instead of just going with array size, you can like use these brackets like this and actually instantiate an array like that, which I don't usually do unless you really need to just do a small array. But like this, because to instantiate each like value to a so an array has an index. So if you want to instantiate each array index to a value, doing it this way is like 1, 2, 3. Let's say you have like 10,000 elements. It would take you a long time to instantiate all of them. So let's just continue on with this. So we have a lot to talk about here. So the new keyword creates an object in memory. It also returns a reference to the array. So in that case, that's just a general notation. So an actual example of that is, for example, int array, or just maybe, yeah, array is fine. Int array, then we go array points to new int array of, let's say, 100 elements. That's how you do it. You could do this in one line. So you could say int array points to new or int array, like int array points to new int array of elements. It's a little tricky. You have to practice it. But it's the same thing. I think you can do both ways. Let me double check that. So let's try that up here. So we could have, so the first way is going to work for sure. So int array, oh, my bad, private int array, like that. And we could here say array. Oh no, I think you can do it that way. And you can also, can you do it that way? I think I messed it up. Yeah, maybe you can't do it that way. So I know in Java you can do it two ways. Usually go with this way, actually. That should work now. Oops. Okay. Private int array, then here you could say array points to new int array of 100 elements. That should work. Okay, so there's that way. Or I think you could go... Actually, I'm not sure if you can do this way because we're using a constructor, but if we're doing it in a method, for example, let's say public void create array. We could create a local array here, I think, so we can go int array 2 points to new int array of 100. That should work. Yeah, so that works. So you may not be able to do that just in the constructor itself. So yeah, that's how you do it. Okay. So in the previous example, there are two statements, int array, and array points a new int of 100. There are two statements can be combined into one statement, so that's what we showed. You can create an array of any data type, so obviously you could not just create an int, you could create a string array, you could create a double array, a decimal array, probably even like a button array if you really need to. You can create, I think you can do that, and then you can also create like custom types, which we'll talk about later on. Excuse me. So an array size declarator must be a positive integer and can be a literal value. So for example, you could say, you could have a constant here or something. You could say the good old const keyword, so const int size, we go array size, points to like 10. Then here you could pass in array size, obviously, right? So you could do that, you'll see that. You could see all kinds of things, like it's one way to do it. You may see that. That's something common you'll usually see. Alright, so let me just have a sip of my drink here. Okay. Alright, so you're becoming a master of the arrays. Arrays are important. When I'm creating a trading bot right now for fun. Well, it's actually not for fun, because some lady wants it to be good. But you use arrays in MQ05, which is C++. It's a framework of C++ to create trading bots. So it's like a bot that just trades for you based on certain parameters. So in MQ05, it's a programming language. It's a framework of C++. It uses arrays in almost everything. So you have to know arrays, and if you don't know arrays, you can't code, you can't make the bots. Because MQ05, it's an advanced language, like C. It's based on C++. They used to have MQ04, which didn't have good testing, back testing, and it was like a simple version of C++, which it wasn't very effective, so they made it better. So now even all kinds of banks and brokers around the world, that's the #1 programming language. There's also something else called NinjaTrader, which some people use to trade stocks and stuff. That uses C#. So it's interesting that basically the biggest finance bot, ways to create bots in finance, they use C++. They use C#, some of them use Python. Pretty much that's it. Those are the languages that they use. So yeah, so arrays are very powerful. Some of those people get like returns of like 100% every quarter, which is crazy. They're like super smart, but yeah, so you have to use arrays to do that. Okay, so anyways, that's just basically an example of where arrays are used. So if you think it's a joke, they're not. They're actually really important. So let's just move on to array elements. The storage locations in an array are known as elements. I call them indexes. So usually an array actually this may be wrong. It might be correct for Microsoft, I'm not 100% sure. But the way I think of them is that each array has an index, and each index stores an element, or basically a value. So in memory, an array's elements are located in consecutive memory locations. Okay, so each element in an array is assigned a unique number known as a subscript. Okay, so the subscript is the index. Subscripts are used to identify specific elements in an array. Subscripts start with 0 or indexes start at 0. The elements has subscript 0 and nth has n-1. So basically an array index goes from 0 to n-1, where n is the number of. So let me try to make this into an understandable example. So let's pretend we have just like 4. Array size is 4. Pretend this one's 4 2. Let's do it in the notes here, so let's just change these to so that's the two ways you can instantiate the array. Now an array so let's say an array has 4 indexes. So it would be so n is going to be this number here. So that means this array's index goes from index 0 to n-1, or 0 to 3. So array index 0, array index 1, array index 2, and array index 3. This is indexed 0 to n-1, where n's 4. 0 to n-1, where n is 4. Because that's the number of, basically that's just n, so just remember that. So it's, therefore, then it's indexed 0 to 3. 0, so it has 4 indexes. 0, 1, 2, 3, that's 4 indexes, because you have to count 0. So it's the same as a string, so it's a string's index the exact same way. Okay, so once you get that, then we'll talk about this a little bit more here. So working with array elements, so we change size up here to, or whatever, to 4. Right, so we have 4 for the size. Constant size points to 4. Private int array. We could take this one out. So private int array, So when I say array, I'm just going to say array. So private int array, Then array points a new int array. So array points a new int array of array index array size. Sorry, haven't made array videos in a while. I teach the exact same thing in Java really well, so if you guys want to check out arrays, it's the exact same thing as C++, C Sharp pretty much, even C++, so check out the Java data structures series. I also do arrays in Python, so they're, sorry, not arrays, I guess in Python they're called lists. Okay, so let's say, so we have constant int size points to 4, private int array. Then we have array points a new int passing in array size as a size. Now in the constructor we can say array of index 0, array of index 0 like that, points to the value 100, right? Then we could say array of index. This is one way to instantiate an array. There's like 3 ways to do it, maybe more. So array of index one. So array of index index 1, or array of index 1 points to 101. So we could just do this. Array of index 2 points to 102. Array of index 3 points to 103. If I try to go array of index 4, I'll get an array out of bounds exception, whatever that's called in C#. It's gonna say, hey, wait a minute, I don't. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That should give you an error. It hasn't caught it yet because look, there's only 4 indexes here. You'll get tested on this too. So there's only 4 indexes. That means there's only space for 4 elements. Excuse me. Sorry, my throat's getting all stuffed up. Excuse me. Okay, so we have basically array size only has, or the array size is set to 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Whoops, 1, 2, 3, 4. This 5th index will cause an error or an exception. Excuse me. Let me just have a sip of my water here. Alright, so that's pretty much it. You could use a for loop to instantiate an array, which we will be doing. Basically, just trying to remember off the top of my head. So that's one way to do it. So that you could do that. I'm not sure if you can do this in the constructor, but we'll go for it here. So you could say for int I points to 0, I is less than array dot length. Can you go with dot length? So we can reference the a method of arrays, I think. Whoops. Maybe you don't need those there. Okay, so in C# you don't have parentheses there, I think. Okay, maybe that's confusing. So let's just go with an actual number. So you can put an actual number here rather than a method. So you could say, okay, for int I points to 0. So we've gone over for loops. So for int I points to 0, I is less than. Well, we want to iterate this less than 4 times. So 0, 1, 2, 3, the 4th time would be out of bounds. Or you could say less than or equal to 3. But since we have 4 and 4, let's just go with that. So you could do that, and then you could say I++. Then you could say array of index I points to I plus 1. That you could populate the array index with values like this. So I'm 100% sure we're going to be doing a lot of those examples coming up. If that's confusing to you, you will see this in code though often, and you'll see the other way too, like I is less than array. So you reference a name dot length. So arrays have methods, built-in methods, a bunch of stuff. So you can work with arrays and with like so C# Microsoft has like, if you look on the docs arrays, you'll see a bunch, like maybe even hundreds of methods that you can use with arrays. Excuse me. So that's just one way you can initialize values. Obviously, you can use like a random number generator to do that. You could have some kind of formula. You could do something, some kind of specific way too. get the values. So we'll come back to that later on. Don't worry, we'll just keep it simple for now. So if we want to reference, we want to get the value of the third element, for example, we use array of index 2 points to 2 times 10. So you can store a random value in there. So it's going to say the array of, so the value at array index 2, or the value of at array of index 2 is going to store the value 2 times 10, so 20. So at array of index 2, we've changed the value from 102 to 20. Right? So arrays are, so there's one-dimensional arrays, there's two-dimensional arrays. We'll probably talk about all those. These are one-dimensional arrays. There's also multi-dimensional arrays, which usually you don't see more than a two-dimensional array. If your professor wants to trick you, they may include like a 3D array. Usually just 2D is the most common. So yeah, I don't even think I got tested. Maybe a little bit on a 3D array, but nothing crazy. So this is getting to be half an hour, so I'll probably just end it here. We're about a third way done. So thanks for watching, guys. If you guys liked the video, you can like and subscribe to the channel to support the channel for more programming and investing tutorials. And the next video will be continuing with arrays. So hopefully I'll see you guys there, and take care. Thanks.